Okay, hi Mom, hi Dad, hello everyone out there. Welcome to the podcast here tonight. We're talking a little bit of history and in a place that I don't know much about, and I do know we're talking about Borneo, the island of Borneo, Sabah, which is Malaysia. It's actually three countries, and I'm here with Joe, and he is a unique situation because you were born.
I was born in Sarawak.
Sarawak.
And I've got Sarawakian Malay ancestry, as well as Scottish ancestry.
Very interesting.
Yes. My hometown's Kuching, but I'm working here with yourself in Kota Kinabalu.
Yeah. And I had heard about Borneo. Actually, I heard about Borneo, or was it Brunei? Was it Brunei? No, I heard about Borneo when I was in Thailand, and they had a lot of durian. That was one thing that I heard about that popped out when I heard that Borneo, and then the connotations were jungle. Durian, jungle, and some sort of like head hunting, connotations in my mind, and then I also heard from the sailing community, people park over in Sabah. That was something that I had heard about on the Borneo side.
Funny you would mention that, because 10 years ago, when I first came to Sabah, I met an American couple who was circumnavigating the globe.
Right.
And they were actually at Sutra Harbor, and and they were homeschooling their child. And I said, what a fantastic way to live.
Oh yeah, great. Do you happen to remember their first name?
I forgot.
No. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of them. During the pandemic, there was some people that have YouTube channels that were parked in Sabah for quite a long time.
So it's quite a hub for those sailing,
Yeah. In fact, for you listeners out there, it was called Follow the Boat. That's the name of their channel. They were here, and thank you very much. We're just ordering a tea here, and you want something? I'm happy to buy you something, Joe.
Okay, I could have another coffee, I suppose.
Can you get him a coffee? I'll pay for it. Thanks. And so interesting that Borneo is three countries also, because I had no idea when I came from the mainland, from KL, and I didn't know that this island had three different countries. I didn't know that this was Malaysia at all. I had no idea until I think I got this situation.
Yeah, well, a lot of people think Borneo is Indonesia or maybe Brunei, and if they do think it's Malaysia, they would say either Sarawak or Sabah. But when they think of Malaysia, they will think of Kuala Lumpur and the peninsula, which is across the sea, around nearly 1,000 kilometers west.
Yeah.
So we are indeed as far away from the mainland Malaysia as Germany or Poland is from the UK.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
So, and that is the scope of a part of the country.
Yeah. And now let's just start by prefacing this interview with the idea that my mother told me that she showed me photos of my grandfather in the military. I guess he's from Ireland. I think it was Dublin. He came over to USA from Dublin. But she said, "Oh yeah, your great grandfather, fought in the Borneo War or something." And then when I was talking to some locals in taxis and things, I would ask them about that Borneo War, but they didn't quite know what I was talking about. And then I thought, well, gosh, I'd hate to say that my grandfather was like fighting the local people. That's like maybe not a good thing for me to say, and then I was trying to pinpoint like where exactly, what was the timeline that he would have done that, and I guess I pinpointed it the late 1800s to the early 1900s.
Well, we have actually got a date of the death of a man called Antonom.
Yes.
And he is a rebel leader of the Murut people, who are the interior people of Sabah.
Right.
And he started what was known as a Rundum rebellion.
Okay.
And he died in 1915.
Okay.
So apparently it could be that he died during the rebellion.
I see.
So we could date the rebellion to around the time of the First World War, in 1915, yeah.
Okay, and the First World War was with the Japanese?
1914, the Great War in Europe. So 1914-18. So around that time, I'm not so sure whether that tallies with your grandfather, great-grandfather's age.
I'm curious if you can give me a timeline between like, what was it like here, let's say in like the mid 1800s, and then kind of go
right.
from there, or even as further back as you could. I mean,
well, okay,
I'm curious.
A long time back, back in the days of let's say the high Middle Ages, that's the year 500, 600, equivalent to what you would call the fall of the Roman Empire in Europe. We had a number of burgeoning empires in Southeast Asia. Notably in Sumatra, there was the Srivijaya Empire, center of Buddhist learning. The Chinese, today you know them as Buddhists. Well, they learnt Buddhism from us, from the Malays, and there was a big university in India called the Nalanda University, and Chinese monks used to come to Sumatra, to this part of the world, to learn about Buddhism with the Malay language, ancient Malay language, and then they would go on to India to learn the Sanskrit texts and all that. And these empires had effects on outlying areas, including Borneo as well. And it's said to be the burgeoning of Malay culture, but this is pre-Islamic Malay culture.
So are you saying, I'm going to try not to interject too much, but are you saying that this land that we're on now was kind of a Buddhist area for a while?
It could have been. It was in the scope of that kind of imperial control. But when we say empire in those days, it's more like a thalassocracy, whereby the further you are, it's more on trade rather than power. So you can imagine the locals here would be trading with the Srivijayan merchants that would come from Palembang, Sumatra, to China, because the major trade was between China, and at this time it would be the Tang dynasty. Tang dynasty China, which is very multicultural China, very different China from today, and multi-religious as well. In fact, it was during Tang dynasty that Buddhism was introduced into Chinese culture, and Chinese people were a little bit afraid of this foreign influence. But today, to say that Buddhism and Chinese culture is foreign to each other is remarkably, we wouldn't even think about it. But back then, Taoism, Confucianism, that was Chinese culture. Buddhism was Indian culture. It came from India. So we are in the crossroads between those two major cultures. And as a result, we became centers of trade and learning and all that. Yeah. Srivijaya fell because of the Chola dynasty in Tamil Nadu, which is the Tamils of India. They expanded around the year 1025.
That includes Nepal, doesn't it?
No.
Kathmandu? No?
No, Tamil Nadu is Chennai, southern India.
Right.
So Rajendra Chola is a very big influence to the fall of the Malay empire of Srivijaya. And eventually, of course, we don't say that was the day it fell, but after that, Malay culture was somewhat vulnerable to other influences that that changed its nature.
Do you think that this was around the time of Angkor Wat, Jayaman Empire,
This is about
the Cambodian?
300 years before, or 400 years before Angkor. Yeah. So it's a very.
You're taking us way back, yeah.
I'm taking you way back. I'm taking you to the time of the the 600s would be around the time of 200 years before Vikings invaded Britain.
Okay.
Around that time, yeah.
And so you're saying that now I'm of the belief that, you know, the picture that we always seem to get from history is that, you know, there's like thatched huts everywhere,
yes,
you know,
yes,
which,
yes.
I mean, I kind of, it's a little bit, come on, we've seen ornate buildings around the world. We know that there were these,
Angkor, for instance, is highly ornate, yes.
Yeah.
There's nothing like thatched huts about that.
So it's really hard for me to believe that here is going to be, you know, just left to be a complete jungle. I mean, can you kind of elaborate on, you know, what was here, what was in Kuching, what was Sarawak, like what kind of architecture?
It's very hard to say because
it is.
Most of the building material for normal people would be wood and thatch, and all these things are organic. Yeah. And eventually the jungle will take it over over time.
Right.
So you didn't really have the technology of concrete right up until the time the British came, but prior to that, you did have the technology of stone and bricks. And I mean, you see some of the temple complexes in West Malaysia. There's one in Lembah and in Java, there's Prambanan and Borobudur, not to mention, are all built out of bricks.
And where are those again?
In Java.
In Java.
Yeah. And
for the listeners, where's Java actually?
Java is the main island of Indonesia, you know, where Borobudur, one of the largest Buddhist monuments, was created sometime in the High Middle Ages as well.
Okay, Java. Yeah. So we're calling Jakarta the entire island.
Surabaya, Yogyakarta, that whole island west of Bali is Java. Yes.
I see. Okay, yeah, so that's sort of the old name, right?
It's still called Java.
It's still called Java. Okay.
Yeah. Java.
Okay.
Yeah. And so after the fall of Srivijaya, due to the Tamil invasion, there was a Javanese empire that called itself Majapahit, and it had influence over Southeast Asia as well.
Majapahit.
Yes.
Pahit.
Yes, its center was in eastern Java, in an area known as Trobulan. Yes.
Can you say that one more time?
The area of Trobulan. Trobulan, the city of the moon, yeah. Bulan is moon in Old Malay. And this, the Majapahit Empire had influence over this part of the world from around the time of Angkor, around similar time. We're talking about 1300s here, the era of Edward I of England, you know, around that time. Yeah.
And what was the setup? What did the setup look like? I mean, were there any kind of temples?
Oh, there were huge temple
complexes. Were people dressing in orange robes? I mean,
no,
what did it look like?
If you're looking down, you can always look them up how Majapahit people dress, but if you look at how Balinese culture is today, the kind of dress that they have in Bali, that's the kind of dress that they would have had in Java. Can you imagine the whole of Indonesia was once like Bali, because that's a remnant of pre-Islamic Southeast Asia.
Right, I heard that Bali was one of the highest, they called it the highest spiritual cultures known to man. I mean, can you say why exactly would they be?
Well, they were yogis. They were practitioners of Hindu Buddhism, meditation, and a lot of the stuff that New Age Westerners are learning about today. Meditation, breath. Yoga, it's thousands of years old,
right?
And it existed in this part of the world as a form of discipline before the coming of Islam, and we've been practicing it for so long. So, if the West sees the benefit today in a mindfulness and all that sort of stuff, we could say that the Balinese were doing it long before and have been living that kind of lifestyle
So what happened with the island of Bali?
Yeah.
What was there an original name for that particular island?
That I do not know,
Okay.
but what I do know is that after the rise of Demak, which is an Islamic kingdom under Radin Fatah, Majapahit slowly dwindled, and the influence of Hinduism and Buddhism, the old culture, slowly left, and it retreated. The last vestige of that culture was in Bali. They ran to Bali, and that's why Bali is the only place in Nusantara, this part of the world, that still maintains the old religion.
Do you think were they attacked? Were they forced out? I mean,
They were attacked, forced out, possibly, yes. Some of them converted to Islam, so automatically the place became more Muslim and less, I don't know whether tolerant or not, because you must remember that Islam, when it first started around 700 years ago here, started off as a belief system that was very much in congruence with the native spirituality. There was very little of the Middle Eastern exclusivity, and they couldn't go to the sources back then. There were nobody going to universities in Egypt and stuff like that, learning what true Islam was. But these were Sufi mystics, almost Hinduized because they spent years in Persia and India as well, prior to coming here. So they knew how to speak to the locals and how to tell them, oh, this is how you can have magic. This is how you can have. See, prayer is magic. So this is how you can still carry on with your yoga and yet at the same time worship God. So there was a lot of. It wasn't Islam as we know it today. It was kind of a syncretic, peaceful coexistence. Yeah, and for something like that, you didn't need something like the Crusades to force people to convert. People would naturally convert, and one of the reasons why people converted was because Islam was more of a democratizing religion. In the past, you had god kings, but now Islam's kind of reduced the king status to God's appointed leader, not a god. He's not the reincarnation of Vishnu or Buddha or Shiva or whatever. He's not an avatar of a god. He's not divine. He's just human. But he's a sultan. He's the one with. So they've changed the meaning of what that is, and I think that's very important because when you look at the history of Borneo and later on with Brunei and other sultanates coming up, you start seeing a new polity emerging out of the old ones, and they're more of the Malay Muslim sultanates. Yeah.
So Bali, why? Okay, so Bali was kind of left alone. You're saying?
Yeah. I mean, they're brothers and sisters basically across the narrow body of water. Dividing Java and Bali. So, you've got cousins across the sea. There's no point. But the only difference is that one is becoming worship of Allah, and the other one's becoming the worship of Shiva or Buddha.
Can you compare the ransacking of Angkor Wat and that area over there, comparing that to anything that happened over here? Is that sort of the same wave?
Angkor was ransacked by the movement of the Thai migration.
Oh, okay.
It came down from Yunnan, southwestern China, which is the home of the Thais. The Thai people, T''AI, they were known as, and of course in their language means free, people
Right.
free. And they migrated down towards what was a place called Varavati, and ancient, and they took up the spaces of the Khmer people, eventually establishing their own kingdoms, like Sukhothai, Ayutthaya, and so forth. And I think it's the coming in of the Thais that kind of like caused problems. But I'm not very, very sure of that kind of that history very well. But what I'm trying to say here is that due to trade and due to political connections, for instance, I actually have ancestry in Java, they said that my ancestry, actually some of them did come from the Javanese kings of Majapahit. When it fell, one of the heirs, not heirs, but the Duke of Mataram's sort of like descendant, she ran to Borneo and married the Prince of Sukadana, and it said after that their son married the Princess of Minangkabau in Singapore, and then they migrated to Sarawak, and they started a new polity in Sarawak. And it said that her daughter married the first Sultan of Brunei's. The daughter is the mother to the first Sultan of Brunei, while her brother is my ancestor. So that's how I'm related to this whole situation. Yeah.
Sitting here with lineage of sort of a royal,
Javanese royalty, yeah.
The royalty, really.
Yeah, and Javanese royalty is we were actually feared by the Mongols, because at the time of Kublai Khan, there was some in the 1200s, there was some invasion towards Java, but when they reached Java, my ancestor Raden Vijaya, the king of Majapahit, the emperor Majapahit, said, okay, let's gouge these guys' eyes out. So we mutilated the Mongol hordes when they arrived here. So, and then they brought back the message to Mongolia, to China, and it's like, don't mess with the Javanese.
Jeez. And this is in
1200s.
So okay, I'm trying to keep the timeline
Sure.
as clear as I. Yeah. So we've got.
I'm in the Middle Ages.
No, we're in the. So there was this changeover that was happening in the. Let's see. Are we saying we said 1200s, 1300s? We're saying.
Yeah, this was the pinnacle of
1200s
of the Majapahit Empire. Yes.
Yeah.
And around this time, there were many kingdoms in Southeast Asia started to become Islamized as well. Mm-hmm. So the beginning of Islamizations around between 1100 and 1300.
Right.
By 1400, you have the establishment of Malacca as a sultanate, and that kind of like, just like the Battle of Hastings, that kind of like defines a change in Malay culture towards a more modern version of itself. So you have the ancient culture that's associated with Indian, Hindu, Buddhist, and then you have, and it's expressed in the language as well, and then you have the more Malay Islamic. Now Malay and Islam are like, they are synonymous with each other.
Okay.
You know, you can't be Malay if you're not Muslim. You can't, and in this part of the world, you're not recognized so much as Muslim unless you're Malay or adopt Malay culture. So, and that has been a very highly contentious issue, especially here in Sabah, where Muslims want to be recognized as Bajaus and Suluks and the other tribes that are Muslim. Not necessarily, they're not Malay. Mm-hmm. They don't speak Malay. Mm-hmm. But because of Malaysia, there's this very contentious issue. Yeah.
So we can say that there was this sweeping of Islam coming over in this direction.
Yeah.
Right, but Bali was kind of left alone. Mm-hmm. Mindanao, I know Philippines.
Yeah,
Mindanao
they were converted
is
Brunei.
quite Muslim over there, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Brunei, Mindanao, but then the other islands, became, were Christians. So, so it didn't make it over there.
Well, actually, so what we consider Christian today, like Pulau Saludang. Saludang is the old name for Luzon, was part of the Brunei Sultanate. And that was because the Spaniards came over and they took over the bits and pieces of the Brunei Empire. Mm-hmm. So after that, Saludang became Luzon and Manila was established there, and then it became a different culture altogether. But as Jose Rizal, the nationalist of the Philippines, once said, we're all Malay people.
He said that.
Yes, and he vouched for the fact that, because in terms of blood, we're all Malay people. Malay as in Austronesian.
Was he Muslim?
No, of course
No.
he was a Catholic. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but when the Filipinos say Malay, they mean in terms anthropologically Malay, as opposed to Chinese or Indian or other ethnic groups.
And what, when you say Malay, what area? We're strictly talking about Singapore,
Malaya. Which is a
what
peninsula.
islands are included in there? I mean, what land masses
the
are?
region that is nominally known as the heartland of Malay culture spreads from western Borneo, which is why Sarawak has its own Malay people, my ancestry, all the way to the Indian Ocean, or to nearby the rim of the Indian Ocean. So that is east coast of Sumatra, all the way down to so Malaya is definitely in the center of all that, which is why it's called Tanah Melayu, Malay land. That includes Kuala Lumpur and Pahang, Johor, Penang, Kedah, and so forth. Terengganu. Yeah. So and that's been a very much center of a great deal of Malay civilization. But there's a huge contention even today. The United Nations has recently upheld Indonesian as a language for the United Nations, much to the chagrin of us Malaysians who wanted it to be Malay. And we had a former Prime Minister, Dr. Ismail Sabri, who said that 226 million people speak Malay. And I was quite proud of that. 226 million people speak Malay. But actually, 75% of them are Indonesian. And in Indonesia, they don't like to be said to be speaking Malay, because Malay is an indigenous group to a certain part of Indonesia. But they've taken the language and they've made it their own. So Indonesian today is not Malay, it's Indonesian. Even though you could compare Indonesian to Malay like American English to British English.
Right, and you feel that's unfair.
Well, personally, I don't really have any particular thoughts about it, but at one point in time I felt that it was unfair because it does come from the Malay people, Malay language. I'm not wanting to sound like a Malay chauvinist, but if it comes from there, then the credit should be given to where it came from. However, we are talking about 80 years of evolution from picking up that language, as it were, and making it a language spoken by an entire nation of hundreds of ethnicities and uniting them in their own culture, in their own ways. And in fact, it's been such a national language with such a huge, rich appreciation of culture that you have Chinese people in China who can speak Indonesian and sing Indonesian songs, and you even have the Dutch back in Holland who love to sing Indonesian songs like as if it's part of their own heritage and culture, because they're so attracted to it, and people celebrating Indonesian culture as part of their own culture outside of being Malay, as compared to here where we're trying to force people to, anyway, I might be going off topic.
No.
Yeah,
I'm just checking to make sure that we're still on recording.
Sure.
So can we go back now?
Let's go back to
Where did if we're saying Islam came over this way, from where?
From Brunei.
From Brunei.
Brunei, yes, Brunei.
You mean it started there?
Well,
or did it start
of course it started in Arabia, but
right.
There were many forms of evangelization going back to the year 1000, the year 1000 even. But it started in the West. Obviously, it's coming from the West, so it comes from Arabia. So it was started in the West, and it came with Indian merchants, came with Chinese merchants that were Muslim. And the first place to adopt Islam as a religion was the Sultanate of Kedah in the northwestern part of Malaysia. Kedah, which is the Sultanate that used to own Penang.
Okay,
yes,
really?
Yes. So that was. I heard that you're interested in learning about Penang.
Penang. I'm curious about Penang because I know that it's a UNESCO site, and these buildings. There's a lot of Dutch Dutch?
Mostly British. British influence.
Was it British there?
Dutch would be
the
Malacca.
buildings?
Malacca. Malacca would be Dutch, yeah.
Where was it that I saw Dutch? There's that fort there, right?
There's a fort, yeah.
What is that fort? But that
Dutch
became a very Chinese. It's a Chinese-controlled area. So
it is. It's a World Heritage Site for the Chinese shop houses that are there. That were built in the late 19th century. But Penang, one thing interesting about it is that there's a lot of drama to its establishment as a British East India Company settlement. And it's got a connection with the Opium Wars.
Yes, I was in the opium den over there.
Yep. And there's an interesting story that I heard somewhere about butter coffee. Why do they drink butter coffee in some of these places? Because the opium dries your throat. That you need to, if you wanna go back to working order, you gotta have some butter in your coffee. Yeah. So it alleviates the dryness caused by all the opium smoking, which of course helped the British economy. Anyway,
that was introduced by the Chinese, though, right?
It was not. It was introduced by the British because they had a lot of opium farms in India.
Okay.
And they wanted to enter the China trade come what may because of porcelain and tea. The Chinese tea and porcelain was the rage in 18th century Europe. And if you can monopolize the market in China, and we're talking about competition against France, competition against the United States came into the competition at one point in time, Spain, Portugal. Portugal had a colony in Macau, so you're talking about a lot of competition among European powers to monopolize the China trade.
So take me back to 1200, 1300 over in Penang. I mean, this was
1200, 1300 over in Penang.
14, 15, 16
would be pretty much under the Kedah Sultanate. It would be one of the longest
Islamic.
It would be Islamic, yes.
Okay.
And in fact, I'll take you to the year 1786.
Yeah.
In 1786, the man called Francis Light, who is the father of William Light, who founded Adelaide.
Okay, right.
Yeah, so they're related. He was a member of the East India Company, and they were looking for a port to settle, establish themselves in Southeast Asia, because they wanted to monopolize the trade, the China trade. But at that time, the Sultan of Kedah, Muhammad Jiwa, wanted there to be this security that if they sell Penang Island, that the British in Penang will help them against the incursion of the Siamese king.
I remember something about this,
Because Siam was a very strong power back then, and Kedah had to send what was known as bunga emas, which is like the flowers of gold, golden flowers, to the Raja at Ligor, which today is Nakhon Si Thammarat. Which represents.
That's amazing. That's where I came from, when I came from to Penang, and I was researching on the train.
You were in Nakhon Si Thammarat?
Yeah, I stayed there, and
south of there is all the Malay kingdoms.
That's what I was researching.
Satun, yes.
And I was reading all about that landmass right through there.
Yeah, and it's sad that it's the British and the Siamese that decided on the border. It's definitely disconnecting thousands of years of Malay civilization.
Now, I had always heard this name Siam. Okay, now Siam, of course, we would say that's Thailand, right?
Yeah,
the
today,
kingdom
since
of
1932,
Siam.
It was called Thailand,
Yeah, it was called
because
Siam before that, right?
Siam before that, yeah.
And isn't there's an island, what is it called? Siam, not Siam Island, but...
Phuket?
Siam...
Koh Samui?
No, it's sort of an island like Guam. I forget the name of the island out there.
Oh.
Anyway, I'll get back to that. But you were taking me back to 1786.
Yes.
Continue and Francis Light.
Francis Light. There was this agreement that the British will help the Sultan of Kedah fend off the Siamese troops should there be any invasion or incursion.
So basically, the Thai people.
Yeah, the Thai people. However, when push came to shove, and Sultan Abdullah, who replaced his father after he died, was calling for help, nothing came. Because the British were friends with the Siamese. And that's what they call it the empty agreement of 1786. And that's when the British not only took Penang, but took the mainland as well, which is why you have Butterworth and Seberang Perai as part of Penang State today.
I see.
That's all part of Kedah. Kedah lost a lot over time. Kedah used to be much bigger than what
How do you
it is
spell
today.
Kedah?
Kedah.
Yeah, that was in my
Kedah.
research. Okay.
The capital is
Kedah.
Alor-Setar. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. So it's one of the Malay sultanates, yeah, and it's actually the longest, continuous royal family, dating back to the time of Robin Hood, dating back to the 1100s,
Okay.
all the way to now. Sultan Muzaffar Shah to today, yeah.
So 1786, basically, so the British
They took
took
Penang.
over Penang, and then continue.
Well, when they took over Penang, what happened was they established this was not the British government. This is like McDonald's taking over Penang. The difference between McDonald's and the American government, because the East India Company was a British company.
Yeah.
It's centered in Calcutta, in India. So, and at that time, the British Parliament did not believe in intervening or colonizing anywhere. Things started to change after 1857.
Basically, a corporation's taking.
It was just corporation. It was just business.
Yeah, yeah.
It was mercantile, not imperial. So, however, you cannot protect trade without a bit of colonialism, because up yonder, where the minerals are, where the tin, the gold, and all that, anything can happen up there that will influence the port city's economy. So if you have
Wasn't there was some tin stuff going on
in Perak, and not necessarily, but Penang's like a sort of port area that depended on trade with Malaya, with the mainland, and in the mainland you had tin production, you had various mineral productions from the mines that were looked after by the sultans, but then they happened to have civil war and unrest. And then you also have the Chinese gangsters as well, the mafia coming in as well, and the Gihin and Hai San. And as a result of this, the economy is stumped, because you're not getting your minerals, you're not getting your the wealth that you want. So the best way to do that is to intervene. And that's when things change from mercantile policy to colonial policy, to imperial policy. And that happened pretty much in the year 1874. It happened in 1874.
Meaning that it becomes under the crown.
It was under the crown after the mutiny of India in 1857.
Mutiny of
There was
India?
a mutiny in India
Where?
in 1857. Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah, that was.
And as a result of that, Calcutta, the East India Company was not demolished, but all of their shares and all that went back to the colonial office in London. So it's now directly from Westminster where things happen. But during the East India Company's time, of course, we have the establishment of Singapore as a port city, and Malacca. They took Malacca from the Dutch. The Dutch had Malacca since 1641, and prior to that, from 1511 to 1641, the Portuguese had it.
I swear that I saw some Dutch stuff in Penang. Are you sure?
It's possible that it's not in Penang, but maybe on the mainland, because the Dutch were interested in mining tin in Perak, and it possibly there was
And
one.
no, and I read
there's
about
one Dutch
the
fort
Dutch. Yeah.
in Kuala Kedah.
Okay.
There's a fort built by the Dutch in Kuala Kedah, which is not far from Penang.
Between Nakhon Si Thammarat and I read
between
about
Nakhon Si
Dutch.
Thammarat and Penang, there are some Dutch buildings. Yeah. So there is one fort, a Dutch fort built at the mouth of the Kedah River. Yeah, that was to pursue Dutch interests in Malaya, but of course Dutch interests in Malaya is from the 17th century. Yeah, 1600s.
And so, okay, I guess jumping a little bit ahead, how did the Chinese come to sort of take over Penang?
Oh, Penang.
I mean,
Like every center of commerce in Southeast Asia, it will attract a Chinese trader or two.
yeah,
Because they're always looking for capital, money, business opportunities, you know. It's part of the culture. We've had presence of Chinese people in this part of the world for 700 years, 500, 600, 700 years, because we are on the China Sea.
right.
So you can expect that wherever there's going to be prosperity, you'll find Chinese people willing to work hard for it. You know, and unlike we're not lazy. I mean, Malays are not lazy. It's just that we are more prone to do certain works than other types of work. You know, but the Chinese are willing to do anything more or less
I see.
to get by. Yeah, and a lot of the plantations that were opened by the British, and the mining and industries and business opportunities that came about from that. Well, these were areas that were open to everyone. Anyone who wanted to spill in their cash, and that's you had burgeoning Chinese communities. Yeah.
So these buildings that are in Penang, they're UNESCO
Like
site.
the Chong Fat Tse mansion and all that. Yeah.
Oh, that's the opium den? No.
There's a couple of mansions in Penang.
Yeah.
I used to be an editor at Marshall Cavendish International in Singapore, and I did edit a book written by Salman, and it's about Penang homes.
Oh, okay.
And there was many beautiful, ornate
I remember
Chinese
that name. Yeah.
homes. And these homes were obviously the homes of rich Chinese merchants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who actually owns those buildings then?
I think they're still in the family.
The UNESCO buildings?
No, you're talking about the UNESCO buildings, the shop houses.
Yeah.
I think they're owned by the government
Of
Penang, possibly.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Can't say for sure. Yeah.
But so people rent those.
Well, they may be owned by individual families, each lot. You know, some of those things go back. Some of the land rights that go back hundreds of years.
So just because it's a UNESCO site doesn't mean that they're not individually owned.
No, it doesn't mean that. Yeah, it just means that in terms of getting rid of them to modernize or build a nice big shopping mall, well, that's a no-no.
So now, to me, it's interesting that the architecture over there in Penang is so amazing. Now, it seems like I want to believe that there was something like that happening around this island that we're on right now. I mean, there's got to be some remnants of. There had to have been. You were saying that a lot of these temples were destroyed. Can you tell me more about some architecture around here? Like, what was that like in Borneo in the most recent?
Borneo, people of Borneo mainly were people who built using natural products.
Right.
Like bamboo, wood, thatch, that sort of thing. So these things, they tend to, over the years, as I said, the forest and the climate, tends to, if they're not underused, tends to have some kind of, they can tend to degrade, Whereas to build a temple, usually that's set around a more arid climate. If you notice, Borneo straddles the equator very closely. I mean, in fact, the equator cuts right through it. But if you notice up in Cambodia, where Angkor is, and down south where Java is actually a subtropical climate. So it allows maybe for more material, for people to find material to build more long-lasting buildings. In fact, some of the houses in Majapahit times still exist today as remnants of bricks, They're still around.
And where exactly?
In Java.
Okay.
And the same could be said, of course, we know in Cambodia, Angkor is still there.
Yeah.
Angkor Thom, Angkor Wat. So definitely those buildings, they stand the test of time because they don't react with the climate too much. But in Borneo, the people here just I mean, there could have been, if we want to speculate, there could have been a time when they might have built something a bit more long-lasting, but we were also prone to piracy as well. So they could have been looted. There is a story of a man called Tugao. He's a very tall man, and he was the king of the Malanao people in central Sarawak. And it says that he was a cruel man because he built a house of timber and wood, but in order to bless the house, he threw the young girl to the base of the to the hole where they were going to put the piling in, and it crushed her body as they built the tall house, and that was a tradition they had back then, and he controlled certain rivers in Sarawak, but his house, no matter how sturdy and big it was, and this was a long house, people in this part of the world like to live in communal houses, so it's like the whole village is in one house. We've got houses in Sarawak that have about 50 to 200 families
in Sarawak
under one roof. Yeah, it's a long house.
What's the oldest house over there, do you think?
I'm not so sure, but I heard that some of them go back 200 to 300 years old.
Okay.
Not too far back, but yeah, like in Anarais, they said that this village was established sometime in the 17th century, the 18th century.
So we're just where we're at right now. We're not in a place that had a lot of deep history, or are we?
We could say we did, but it's a lot hidden because of the humidity, the rainforest, and the dangers of piracy. And as I said, this man, he was very powerful. He had a big house. The story was that, but what he did was he thought he could be the king of Borneo, and he disturbed the burgeoning Brunei Sultanate, which at that time was a small establishment. And by doing that, as the writer of the story, who's a friend of my family, Heidi Munan, she wrote the story, and according to her, it says like hornet's nest, they came out and destroyed Tugao's kingdom. Here. So that not one wood was left standing. The whole house was destroyed. Even though as grand as it was, it's like...
Now, Kuching is how far from where we're at?
About 800 kilometers. 850 kilometers.
That's quite far.
It is, yeah.
Yep. Okay, so you fly there.
I fly there, but I drove here. For the first time I came to KK was in a car, actually. I drove from Kuching, yeah.
So Sarawak has more. Sarawak has a lot of more history there. And
I can't say we have more or less because it was a borderless world back then. There was no Sarawak, there was no Sabah.
Yeah.
It was all Borneo. Yeah. And the tribes went here and there, and there were a lot of things that. One thing that struck me when I visited the Borneo Cultures Museum, if you're interested in history, we have the largest museum complex in Malaysia, in Kuching. And it's called the Borneo Cultures Museum. And it's like a shopping mall of museums.
Oh, wow.
And there's about 5 stories, and they have different galleries. And I was very awestruck by the gallery on level 3 and 2, which talked about just the culture of the interior peoples of Sarawak. And one could imagine that this is a long haul history, that this is a culture that didn't change, was circular, was the way it was from thousands of years till today. So they have no sense of the passing of time until the time the white people came, So,
Well, it's classic tale, this story of headhunters, and can you talk a little bit about that? I mean,
oh yeah, of course.
That was wait a minute. You said Islam came over and then into
but
Borneo.
only affected people by the coast.
Only affected.
We've got interior peoples who are not affected by Islam.
Okay, and where? So
in Borneo.
So where we are was pretty much protected.
What, the coast?
I mean, the headhunting civilization was not really affected.
It wasn't really affected by the coming of Islam.
Right.
They consider themselves separate.
So they were there battles?
There were, not to say battles, just trade between each other.
Okay.
We needed jungle produce, we needed paddy. In fact, the Malays of Sarawak never once grew paddy in their life. All the rice came from the indigenous people. We were fishermen and tradesmen.
Okay.
So that goes to show that we relied on preserving each other's harmony, in other words. So in order that we get the supply of rice, and they in turn get seafood from us, and get Chinese jars, which the Dayaks loved. And of course they in turn also brought us the bird's nest, which we of course traded with China. Chinese people love to use bird's nest for medicinal purposes.
Right.
So we've had this long trade between the coast, the interior, and China. And the Sultan, of course, of Brunei, was a genius in taxing the whole process.
Okay. Here's my segue for my mom.
Yeah.
Who's probably listening. She said that my great-grandfather was here and it was fighting, and she called it the Borneo War. When I looked online, I couldn't find anything except for this skirmish you were talking about, and I narrowed it down that he would have been here between 1890 and then up to maybe 1910. So somewhere in there, it sounds like there were some British troops that came here and were trying to force people to pay taxes.
Possibly.
And does it sound? It sounds like
when the British North
they were
Borneo,
enforcing.
British North Borneo Chartered Company established itself in North Borneo, Sabah. Sabah's old colonial name was North Borneo. They taxed the population. There was an entire company, by the way. It's just like East India Company. They had shareholders in London. They had offices around the British in London, where the shareholders would invest in the company, and of course, the company needed to tax the locals and wanted to expand its power from its base in Kudat first and Sandakan, so this part, so as a result, there was resistance from the local people.
Right.
Like for instance, there was.
But we didn't. It's not necessary. It's not called a war. I mean, that's
skirmishes.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. There was one man called Mat Saleh.
That's the one.
He comes from not far from here, actually, Inanam. Okay, and Inanam is just over there.
Yeah.
And he raided the settlement on Gaia Island, as I mentioned before, with you before. The British wanted to establish a settlement on Gaia Island because, as we all know, the current Kota Kinabalu city is all reclaimed from the sea.
Right.
The only area that is really land is the hilly part. Or if you see the tourist center, that was at the beach practically,
So when you're taking that shortcut into town and you go up the hill and you come down.
That's the land. The moment you come down from there, you're at the beach already,
And all that is.
And all that in front of you, which is commercial buildings today, all of that's the sea. And being reclaimed from the end of the 19th century up to the present day.
That's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, yeah. It's an entire city that's built on the water, really. Yeah.
So they used, obviously, backhoes and...
I'm sure.
It's incredible.
I'm not so sure of the engineering behind it. It's amazing. They do that in Singapore as well, don't they? Yeah. So that's because... So the British did not think that this part of Sabah was suitable for a capital city, where Sandakan had its own natural harbour and land area that could be used. This part did not have that. Though they did develop this part, they even created a railway network which still exists today to the interior.
And that was developed when? 1800s?
Possibly to the end of the 19th century, early 20th.
Okay.
Yeah, it didn't go too far. It didn't go really far in. But it just basically went from Beaufort to KK.
Okay.
That sort of distance, and into Tenom as well. But what happened was Gaia Island was chosen, and because they saw these
By the river.
insects
Yeah. With the lights.
with the lights, and that in Malay
Fireflies.
api means light, you see.
Api, okay.
So the old name of KK was Api Api,
Okay.
the place with all the lights with the insects.
That was this place was known as Api Api.
was known as Api Api. In fact, in Mandarin, Chinese language, KK is called Yapi.
Yapi.
So
Okay.
So yeah. So they took the old name. But later on, it became known as Jesselton because of Alfred Jessel,
Right.
who was a British officer on this side of this side of Sabah. And then after the Japanese War, or the Second World War, then the British took over direct rule of Sabah from the company, and their headquarters was in Jesselton, which is here. And after it entered Malaysia, when North Borneo was given back the name Sabah, the capital became Kota Kinabalu.
Where did that name come from?
It comes from the word Kinabalu, which is the mountain. The mountain,
That was always the name?
yeah, the mountain's called Chinese Widow.
Chinese widow?
Widow, yeah. We're going back to Mongol times now. Back in the old days, many Chinese, Chinese soldiers would come down to Sabah for the, just like a lot of people come down for the beautiful girls and all that, you know. And of course, there was a lot of local beauty here in Sabah, and they would marry. So they would, and one of them went back to China, but before he went back to China, told his wife, if you don't go to the top of the mountain to see if I'm coming back. But of course, word had it that he was either killed during the war, or had another family back home, never came back, and she just waited and waited and waited on the top of that mountain until she died, and she's known as a Chinese widow. Kina, Chinese, China, Kina, Balu, widow. Kina,
Wow.
Balu.
Interesting.
So that's the mountain. But the city or the town near Kinabalu, the town in Malay is Kota.
It's called what?
Kota.
Kota.
So Kota is town.
okay.
So you combine the town with Kinabalu, you get Kota
Oh, I see.
Kinabalu.
Interesting.
That's the name, how it happened. Yeah.
So this whole time, British were dealing with so-called headhunters and
Oh, yes.
tribal people.
Yes,
It's like there's 30 different tribes. Is that
Oh,
right?
lots more, yes. yes.
And why? I mean, are they cannibals? I mean,
No.
what-
Headhunting
Is this
a very,
over embellish the story or what?
Headhunting is a very unique practice, a highly spiritual practice, actually.
Great.
And if you come from the point of view of the headhunter,
Yeah.
a very divine practice.
Uh-huh.
To get ahead in life.
Right. Get ahead.
Literally
gosh.
meant to get ahead in life.
I was always trying to get ahead.
The Dayaks would say that if you were able to get ahead, you could marry because you're showing bravery, and you would get a tattoo marked, a sort of like flower, okay, tattoo. But according to other cultures, the Murut, headhunting was actually caused by fierce feudal feuds
Yeah.
with other
Fighting.
tribes.
Yeah.
So you just get the heads, you know, sever the life, and that was it. And they keep it as a trophy, you know. In the Dayak of Sarawak, they believe that the head is where the spirit resides. You own the head, you own the spirit. And you have to appease the spirit. And if you appease the spirit, you gain the power. So the Dayaks used to actually only cut off the heads of people they admire. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I hope nobody admires me.
Because the spirit is in the
like
head. That's what.
Yeah.
That's the belief. So you see, because of these, because it's a form of civilization in itself, but But because it doesn't tally with our modern notions, and of course it's a very fearful culture to live in by modern standards. Can you imagine if you have a headhunting scare today? In the past, in the 1920s, it was a reality in Kuching. Something new was built. Something new was built by the Raja, like the suspension bridge over the Sarawak River was built, and suddenly there's a headhunting scare. Because you want to bless the bridge. You want to bless the bridge with someone's head.
No way. In 1920?
20s, yeah.
Oh my God.
It had been outlawed for 80 years already, but still, the practice was there, and people were... You know what the Brooks said? The Brooks said, and this is the family of the White Rajas that came to Sarawak, they said that taking away headhunting rights was like taking chocolates away from a child. It was a privilege they felt. And you know what it's like, children and chocolate, right? You tell them don't do it, they'll do it some more.
Jeez.
You sneak a little bit of chocolate there, get a bit of chocolate there, yeah.
In Kuching, where you're from?
Yeah. And it took some time, maybe generations over generations, to slowly get rid of the practice.
I'm jumping around a little bit, but I was told that there are crocodiles in this body of water near us here in, what's it called?
In Annam Colony.
Tanjung.
Likas Bay?
Tanjung, right over here.
Yeah. Yes, that's,
Lipad.
Telok Likas, yeah.
Lipad?
Likas. Tanjung Lipat, yeah, Tanjung
Lipat.
Lipat.
There's alligators in that water.
I only saw the signs. I've never actually seen one here.
Okay.
But behind my house, you can definitely see them.
And we had dinner last night at a restaurant, and the local people were saying that they've known alligators to be at Tong Aru Beach also.
Okay.
That's pretty scary. We swam there.
But thinking of alligators in indigenous culture is very interesting, because they believe that the alligator is actually a human. And there's these morphs between metamorphosis between alligator during the day and human at night.
Oh my God!
And that there's a story of the girl who married the alligator prince.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is, they say that if you don't disturb them, they won't disturb you.
Yeah.
So if you've eaten a crocodile, then there might be some vengeance going on. But if not, they won't disturb you, according to indigenous beliefs. Yeah.
So swimming.
You could swim next to a crocodile.
I see.
So long as you've not disturbed their family, or there's no vendetta between the two
of you.
Kind of
like cockroaches too. They actually have revenge culture too.
Yeah.
Have you never experienced that?
No.
Cockroaches. If you start killing a few in your room, I mean, suddenly the whole family comes. The uncle's there. They're attacking you.
Yeah.
Now, so
we've been here and there, yes.
We've been here and there, and let's see, so interesting that Bali has sort of remained Hindu, Buddhist, and then what else? You said Kuching has a lot of history over there. Sarawak, where is Sarawak again?
Sarawak is to the southwest of Sabah. Southwest.
Oh yeah.
So Sabah has two borders, terrestrial borders. One is directly south, and that's Kalimantan Utara. It's part of Indonesia.
Yeah.
And to southwest is Sarawak. Yeah.
Okay.
I can mention a bit about my background in Sarawak, if you like.
What's
if you watch the movie The Edge of the World, you'll notice there's a man called Datuk Petinggi Ali, and he was the head of the Sarawak Malay nobles. And these are people who are descended from, as I mentioned before, from that lineage of
Japan. I gotta watch this movie, yeah.
So
Edge of Darkness, right?
Sorry?
Edge of Darkness?
No, Edge of the World.
Edge of the World, okay.
Yeah. It's got Jonathan Rhys-Meyers in it.
Okay.
As James Brooke.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, the thing is that the Brookes were siding our family against the Bruneians. So Bruneians lost control to the Brookes. But the Bruneians lost control to the Brookes, and my family came into prominence. We became the the head of the chief of the natives, of Sarawak. So my Dato' Petinggi Ali's second son, Bo Hassan, is the father of Bandar, and Bandar Qasim is my great-grandfather's father, and then there's my great-grandfather, his daughter, my dad, and me. So it's that's the lineage. From
Pretty incredible. So is this going to all make sense once I see the movie a little bit more?
Yeah. When you see the movie, I could point out one point.
Yeah.
Where the man shouts, "Dato' Petinggi Ali!" Mm-hmm. And he takes out his sword. He's about to kill the man.
Yeah.
And James Brooks said, "No, I'll take Sarawak. Sarawak's mine. Leave the man alone." Mm-hmm. He was the head of the rebellion. Well, that man there, Dato' Petinggi Ali, is my direct ancestor.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a Malay man.
Jeez.
Malay man who...
Talking to the right person here tonight, Mom. Dad, if you're listening.
Yep. And he died in 1846 during an expedition against the Skrang Ibans.
You're...
My ancestor, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, in 1846. Because James Brooks, starting from the 1840s, decided to help the British Empire get rid of two things, piracy and headhunting. Mm-hmm. Two of these things he was in charge with.
I'm surprised they didn't, the headhunters didn't get Brooks, no?
No.
He had a small army with him, I guess.
No, the closest anyone ever came to what was called Brooks' decapitation happened also, funnily enough, in 1857. What a year that was, because the Chinese rebelled. So you have a Chinese mining town, gold mining town, southwest of Kuching called Maosan. Okay. Today it's called Bao. And there was a man called Liu Shanpang. So you can imagine, he's a Chinaman with those the long hair like that. And anyway, he gets all the Hakka miners together because again taxation, and he attacks Sarawak, Kuching. And as he's attacking Kuching, the Malays, my ancestors, are defending, are fighting against the Chinese now. They want to defend the town against the capitulation of the Chinese. The Malays smuggle James Brooke out of the place. However, what a poor lad this was. His secretary was an 18-year-old boy that was still left in the residence. When the Chinese stormed the residence, they decapitated his head and paraded it around the town, saying that we found James Brooke. He was an 18-year-old British boy.
Is that in the movie?
No, that's not in the movie, but that should have been part of the movie.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
But they edited it.
I see. Right. But you were happy with the movie? I mean, all in all?
Not so much. I would have liked that scene. They kind of replaced it with some other kind of nonsense.
I see. They didn't film that around here, obviously.
What's that?
That movie, they didn't film that.
They did.
They did?
They filmed it in Kuching.
No way.
A lot of places taken from Kuching.
Really?
And it's well done. It's well done. It's well done for what it is. But I'm just saying that the history is a little bit edited.
Yeah, I see.
For one thing, Raja Muda Hashim is not in it, and he's a very important player. Okay. His uncle is the Sultan of Brunei. The Sultan of Brunei is not in it, obviously because there's a lot of, nowadays, we want to keep things a little bit more clean, let's say, image-wise, political-wise. But there was that Sultan. He directed assassination of his own uncle and Prince Badruddin for their treachery against the Sultanate by allowing James Brooke to take over the land. So, and Prince Badruddin was a very good friend of James Brooke. But as a result of that, James came with his royalist. His boat was like the biggest boat in the land. It was a yacht, a schooner. And he invaded Brunei town at gunpoint, saying, give up Sarawak. And those days, Sarawak was just a small province. It didn't come as far as Sabah. Or we'll shoot the palace. So, from then onwards, Brooke was not a governor of Sarawak for Brunei, but a king of his own land.
Is the palace still there?
Which one?
The palace still there?
Which one? The Sultan's Palace?
The one you're talking about? The one you're referring to?
The Astana is the Brooks Mansion. In Sarawak. It's still there. Still there. It was built in mortar and brick in the 1870s. But
Same place, still there.
but
Was that in the
there
movie?
was a bungalow before that. It was a wooden bungalow.
I see.
Yeah.
Was that in the movie, that
The
building?
bungalow was in the movie. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. They used to have the whole movie online, but I think they got rid of that. You have to buy it now.
Wait, the movie online?
They used to have the full movie.
You know what? If you try BitChute, you know BitChute?
No, I've never heard of them.
BITCHUTE.
I see.
They've got a lot of movies on there that
Okay. It's worth trying.
they
yeah.
just put up there. So should we stop here for now?
Sure. Yeah.
I could go on all night,
We
but
could go on all night. Yeah. But are you satisfied with the skirmish and because this is, after all, for someone special about your ancestor and about Saba, about his the involvement with with what happened here.
yeah. Well, it sounds like he probably just was sort of like this reinforcements on the British side,
possible,
and so I don't think it was a war.
No,
I think
it was a skirmish, possibly.
it was probably just
Yeah,
he was
yeah.
just.
There were
I think what was the word? No, there was constabulary. Constabulary. So
Yeah.
now, what is a constabulary exactly? Just sort
Not
of
so sure, but I think it is part of a regiment, a British regiment. It's a part of the
Weekend
army.
warriors.
Yeah,
or maybe
yeah. So
something
they're
like
basically soldiers. Yeah.
Yeah. Just enforcement.
Enforcement
type,
soldiers. Yes.
So
Keeping the peace, possibly. Yeah.
So maybe he didn't. Maybe he didn't touch us all.
Possibly not.
Yeah.
No.
So if you're interested to do a part 2, we have
sure.
3-4 more weeks left or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe we could do another one.
Just let me know. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we only kind of touched the surface.
Touch the surface here and there. Yes.
But I could do, probably out of this, I can do part 1 and 2 and maybe 3.
Yeah, sure.
We're having a whole hour here, I think.
Yeah.
What did we do? What do you think that was, an hour?
It's okay.
Hour and 12 minutes.
There we go.
Okay, so let's just do a wrap up here, and then I'll add. Okay, so very interesting, Joe, talking to you.
My pleasure. Yeah.
You're quite close to the action, I would say, right? With your family being involved, and it's very interesting. I'm sure we could do a part 2 and touch on some of the other, like what else would you include if we continue?
Well, we continue. I could talk a little bit more about my own family background, which is very enriching to this experience because, and especially with the formation of Sarawak and closing in on that. But also we could talk about the fact that Borneo hides a lot more secrets than it portrays. Because and here's an interesting thought. I was in New Zealand in the year 2011. And I was with a friend of mine, and she comes from the interior tribes, the Kenya tribe. And she spoke with a Maori woman, and we all spoke together, and we did the number game. What's number 1 in your language? What's number 1 to 10? And it turned out 95% identical. The number 1 to 10 in Maori and Kenya. And they also have similar art as well. And it's said that 5,000 years ago, in eastern Borneo, they migrated across the Pacific. So
right, that's kind of you're touching on. I want to get more, if we can uncover some of these. You know, instead of, I mean, it just, to me, if I just think of this idea of people just like wandering around the jungle headhunting, I mean, it just, I want to believe that there's like more to the story, you know what I mean? So,
and if that were the case, then you could trace Hawaiian culture to Borneo.
Yeah.
Because Maoris claim to have come from Hawaii. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the entire Pacific culture. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they all call Borneo home. And they call themselves the people of the bird people, which a lot of their dances tend to mimic.
People of the bird. Maybe I'll use that as the title for this.
Yeah.
In Borneo.
In Borneo, because we have the dance of the eagle, Rojang Ba'a, by the Bidayus, and the dance of the Kenyalang, the hornbill, by the Ibans. So you have this connection with nature, with the birds and the movement.
Well, I'll do a little bit of research on my end and come up with, you know, but this area of the Philippines, and then you know, Palawan is here, and then we could talk about, you know, Philippines, you know, the skirmish with Philippines, and some of the locals were saying, yeah, you know, this is the Philippines, you know, this was the so we could get into that a bit or whatever. But well, fascinating, Joe. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I'll put this one up first, and anybody have any questions or comments? Please ask your questions, and then for the next video, we'll talk about it. Joe, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Bye-bye.
See y'all later. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.